You're already where you're going. So that allows for, that's a paradox now, because you're practicing getting where you're going, you're practicing waking up to the truth, you're practicing being what you really are, and at the same time, what the teachings tell you is that you're already there while you're doing that. While you're practicing to get there, you're already there. Right? So it covers both bases, you see. It covers both bases, and this is why I talk about predestination and no free will, because it's the truth, that's the truth, but the reality you're living in is not that. You're living in the time-space reality, being a body and a personality, right? So in the time-space reality, being a body and a personality, to continue to function in that time-space reality, being a body and a personality, which is the way life is lived, that's the reality in which we're living our lives, right? So in that reality, you're in the process of awakening. You're in the process of paying attention so that you see the personality in operation. And part of the teaching is that this personality that you're seeing operating is in the way of experiencing what you really want to experience, because it's not what you actually are. So you have to get from there to what you actually are to experience what you actually want to experience, which is only available in the truth. It's not available in the dream. So both bases are covered. On the one hand, you will spend the rest of your life practicing being awake, practicing being the truth, practicing being what you actually are. You'll spend the rest of your life doing that because your brain has to live your brain has to learn to live in a double world, in a double reality. One aspect of that is the ordinary way, the ordinary reality that everybody's experiencing, that you will continue to experience, and you have to live in that world. You have to live in that world. That's what they mean when they say you're not you're in that world, but you're not of that world. You're in that world, and you're living your life in that world with other human beings in the time-space reality, with the conditioning, the original conditioning that occurred. And at the same time that you're in that world living that way, you're practicing, you're using your energy every day to practice being what you actually are, because you understand through the teachings that only when you're being what you actually are can you experience what's possible. Only when you're being what you actually are can you be happy, satisfied, and at peace, because what you actually are is happy, satisfied, and at peace. Right? So you're practicing being that in the time-space domain, and at the same time you're practicing doing that, if you're going to deal with the truth, you have to include in the experience you're having while you're practicing that you're already where you're going. Both things are simultaneously true. You're already going where you're going. You're already going where you're headed. Right? That part of it is the weaker aspect of it, isn't it? Yeah. That's the weaker aspect of it, because it's as much as you can see that that's so when you refer to the teachings, when you do the practices, as much as you can see that that's so, the orientation in time, space, and being a personality that's practicing staying awake, practicing seeing when you're not being who you are, that has to continue to play. That's not going to stop playing. That has to continue to play. So the weaker side of this equation is the side that you're already there, right? So we want to strengthen that aspect of this. This is one of the reasons why I speak about predetermination and no free will. It's not just an interesting, reality to talk about, because it's so esoteric. You know what I mean? It's not just talking about it for that. It's talking about it because it will strengthen the other side of the equation, that you're already there. It'll strengthen the idea that you're already there, because if everything is predetermined, then it has to be true that you're already there. Do you see what I'm saying? So in order to make the changes necessary to have who you're being be consistent with the truth, right? You're using thinking in the working mind domain. You're using thinking in the working mind. When you're working on reconditioning your conditioning, that's the working mind, okay? So you're using the working mind. And you're not being a personality, you're using the form of the personality. You're being the awareness using the form of the personality and using the brain of the body to do the working mind thinking, to do the reconditioning work. But that's one side of the equation in time, and as a physical being, as a personality being used by the awareness. The personality can't do it on its own. I've said that here before, right? When I've said that that the personality is unable to act in its own best interest. It's unable to do it. You know, I'm not making that up. It's unable to do it. You know, the personality functions at the effect of how it feels and what the thoughts are that it's having, doesn't it? It's like the Peace Pilgrim. You know, I mentioned her here. You know, she was a famous character that walked back and forth across the country for peace. Before she started to do that, because she was going to do something that's impossible for the person to do. You know what I mean? If you or I decided we're going to walk back and forth across the country, thousands of miles, every day, walking a lot of miles every single day with no money, right? We wouldn't last very long, you know. We wouldn't last very long before you would call for help. Bring me home, pick me up, right? But she went into the woods and walked in the woods in the middle of the night and looked up at the moon and was talking to God and asked God to give her the ability to do that. Give me the ability to be in touch with my true nature so that when the mind comes and when the emotions come that would limit me and keep me from being able to do this, that it doesn't stop me. You know, that was her prayer. And her prayer was answered because she was able to do it. She was able to stay in touch with her source. She was able to stay in touch with the source so that whatever went on with the physical body and the mind and the emotions was not going to stop the process. And she demonstrated that in her awake state, she walked back and forth across the country, I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of miles. And near the end of her life, and she was obviously having a consistent experience of the truth of who she was as she was doing that, because she would stop at various locations and give a talk about the truth. Right? And then near the end of her life, she was starting to, people around her were starting to say that she was becoming less and less, seemingly less and less aware of this ordinary reality that we're all sharing. She was seemingly becoming less and less aware of that and more experiencing a state beyond that. And just before she died, you know, there were people that said that she was making comments about the fact that she was about to die. She was about to leave. And then she was involved in a car accident and died. So, you know, we can't know what her experience was, but the evidence seems to indicate that she had transcended her ordinary physical life and was able to do things that were miraculous type things beyond. So we may not be planning to walk back and forth across the country, you know, and be somebody who is giving their life over to informing people about the possibility of peace. But in our own lives, you know, where you start, where you want to start with this work and these teachings and practices is to be willing to have the audacity to look with honest eyes at where you are, to look with honest eyes at where you are and what you're doing and whether or not you're acting in your own best interest. Just to be able to look and see what the answer to that is honestly is a big, important step. Am I acting in my own best interest? Right? Am I able to act in my own best interest? Can I do things that are beyond what I feel like doing? Can I do things that are inconsistent with the way my thought process works? Can I do things like that? Well, in order for you to do things like that, you've got to be clear about who you are so that no matter what the thoughts are that arise or no matter what the feelings are that arise, you're able to stay committed to the actions that you've intended to take. And if you can pull that off, right, if you can pull that off, then why wouldn't you start to do what works? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you be healthy if the possibility of being healthy is actually available? So once you realize what it takes to realize that possibility, right, then your practice of being conscious and awake and being what you really are becomes even more meaningful, because now you know, if I can stay in that channel, if I can stay in that experience, then I can do what works, which means I can have the health that's available to me, to my body. I can have the health that's available to my body. You know, I can start to eat in a way that is consistent with being healthy. I can start to behave in a way that's consistent being healthy, not just in terms of my physical body, but I can start behaving in my relationships in a way that is consistent with being healthy too. So my life starts to transform, right? Just in the process of living my life, it starts to transform, because my understandings and my practices are taking me out of the conditioning and bringing me in line with the way things really are, so that my actions become consistent with what works. I start experiencing a life that's consistent with what works. And I continue to do that, right, because I know that there's no end to the process, because life keeps throwing new challenges at you all the time, right? And so you have to deal with the new challenges, right, by being able to respond to it, instead of continuing to play the same neural patterns, the same patterns of behavior. You've got to stay awake to be able to respond to life as life is happening in real time, right? But in order to do that, in order to be able to do that, you have to understand that while you're practicing this, and the practice will involve failures, while you're practicing this, the practice will involve mistakes, failures, periods of time when you go back to sleep, periods of time when you're in your reactive emotions, right? Periods of time when you do stupid shit again, right? So while you're in the process of practicing, that's going to continue to be the case, all right? So in order for it to really work, you have to understand that even while I'm practicing, right, to realize what's possible, I'm already there. I'm already where I'm trying to get to. That allows me to have transcendental wisdom. That allows me to experience a transformation even in the incomplete state that I'm in. I'm not fully complete in terms of I'm not fully being what I really am all the time. I'm not fully complete in that regard, right? But my experience is still an experience of fulfillment, satisfaction, well-being, peace, and happiness, because I know I'm already where I'm going. You know, this is a paradox. So, you know, when you listen to me say this, your mind will go, okay, I'm understanding that, and then I say, and I'm already where I'm going, and your mind will go, wait a minute, wait a minute. That's not the same as you were just talking about, right? So the mind can't hold a paradox. The mind can't hold two opposite things at the same time. So you can only talk about this side of it, and then talk about this side of it, and realize that when you're talking about this side of it and this side of it, that they actually are equal. That at the same time you're practicing being what you already are, while you're practicing being that, you're it. You are it. You are it. In order for you to practice being it, you have to be it practicing being it, don't you? So you're already it. This is important because it allows you to relax and accept the process. It allows you to relax and accept the fact that you'll continue to live life in such a way, well, the learning curve will never end. It will never end. Why? Because life is going to continue to present you with unique situations, right? And because you're now waking up, and because you're now seeing things as they are, where in the past you could only be the way you were as a personality, so life keeps hitting you with new situations, you continue to just be the same way in regard to those different situations, right? And so you're not very effective. Do a lot of suffering, right? But when you start to wake up and you're seeing things as they are, then when things are coming at you from life, you have the ability to respond to it in a way that's effective. So you're working to get that to happen as frequently as possible, but at the same time, you know that you won't succeed in getting that to happen as frequently as possible, yeah, because life will continue to throw different things at you that are unique and different, right? And you'll miss some of those balls. It's like being at bats. You'll miss some of those balls. You won't hit a home run every time. That's going to continue. That won't change. But while that's happening, you can experience already being satisfied, happy, peaceful, and satisfied. Yeah. When your ability to pay attention, right, wanes because something comes at you, and you recognize when it comes at you that it stimulates a neural pattern, and that neural pattern starts to play. But now you've been practicing being awake consistently enough that when that plays, you realize, wait a minute, that's not an appropriate response to what's happening. You couldn't see that before because you weren't awake to see that before. You were identified with the response. You were being the personality. But now when you can see that that's not an effective way to relate, to what's happening, right? And so because that's the case, right? Because that's the case, then I use that situation as a means to recognize who I am in that situation, as a means to recognize the witness is witnessing this. The witness is seeing this as it actually is, right? And because that's the case, and because I didn't follow the thinking process, right, the thinking mind, I didn't follow that, right? So now there's an opportunity for me to generate something that is unique, something that is creative, something that is new in response to what life presenting me with. The personality thinks awareness is something it has. Right? That's being aware. The personality considers awareness something it uses, it has, right? The teachings and the waking up and the realization and the discovery is it's not something that you have, it's what you are. That's the shift. And when you start to experience yourself realistically as what you actually are, now you're seeing things as they actually are because you're looking from a real place now. You're not functioning from a program that's playing in your brain, which is what the personality uses. And so when you're dealing with life coming at you, you're now practicing staying awake. So when you're awake and life throws you a curveball, you can hit the ball. Because you're awake, you're there, you see it, you understand it, right? But when life throws you a curveball, and when that ball's coming at you, you happen to buy into a belief from the past, or you happen to get caught up in a neural pattern that starts to play, and you don't recognize it for what it is, then you're going to miss the ball. Then the situation isn't going to work out, right? This is the thing that makes things difficult for a lot of people, because when that happens, the personality steps in and says, see, this meditation, these teachings, they don't work. Didn't you just notice that it didn't work? Right? That's what you're up against. Because the personality the personality is programmed for you to not wake up. I saw something the other day, a saying that really caught my attention. It said, if you want to keep somebody from discovering, if you want to keep somebody from being free, you have to keep them from discovering that they're in prison. It's a very interesting concept, right? If you want to keep somebody from being free, you have to keep them from discovering they're in prison, right? See, so they're in prison, but you keep relating to the situation, you keep relating to where they are like they're free. People do that with one another, don't we? Human beings consider each other to have free will. Human beings consider each other to be free, to do things and, to have life work and so forth, right? That's not true. That's not true, because that human being is in prison, which is a state of confinement, and the state of confinement in the prison is the limited little way that you have to deal with the world. The personality is a limited little way to deal with a world that's infinite, a limited little way to deal with that, right? And so that's a state of confinement, that's prison, right? So in order to keep somebody in that prison, you have to have them continue to believe that they're not in prison. That explains humanity. That explains humanity, because everybody does. Most human beings consider the idea that they're in prison to be ridiculous. That's ridiculous to think I'm in prison. I can do whatever I want. I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm not in prison. I can do whatever I want. I can prove it to you. I can do whatever I want. See, because the person who is in that state of mind doesn't understand what they think is doing whatever you want is being a slave to the thought process. You think you're doing whatever you want, but all you can do is what your thoughts tell you to do. You think you're doing whatever you want, but all you can do is what your feelings allow you to do. So how are you doing whatever you want? That's a prison that you're in. That's a prison that you're in. And I can prove it because I can sit down with you and say, look, here's what works in terms of taking care of your body and your health. Here's what works. So prove to me that you can do whatever you want. Do it. Do it. And nobody can do it. Nobody can do it. In the state that you are, even if they attempt to do it, they'll do it half-assed because the personality is not committed to anything. Not really. I see people all the time come to the gym and they get on the machines while they're playing with the phone, and they get on the machines and they're not really exerting anything, right? And they do that for 10 minutes. They can't tolerate it any more than 10 minutes. I got to stop. I watch it. People can't tolerate it. You know, people can't tolerate intense exercise very long because the personality doesn't want to be there.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, and personality doesn't like being uncomfortable. So while you're trying to do it, it's talking to you saying, that's enough, right? Your personality can play the cop and the robber. It can play both sides of anything. It can split itself up into 3 or 4 different personalities in your head, right?
God, we're all civil.
But that's what's going on. I mean, you don't even have one personality, do you? No, your personality is a multiple personality because you're one way with your husband, you're one way with your kids, you're one way at work, you're one way in the public. So your personality, you got a mess going on. You got a lot of dysfunctional personalities taking turns. You have a lot of multiple personalities taking turns using your energy and your life so that they can live their lives. If you listen to the personality talk about this process in these teachings, it's critical. This is difficult. This is hard. You know, I'm not getting it. This is too hard. That's too abstract. That's expecting too much. Right? Of course it's expecting too much from the personality because the personality is literally incapable of doing this. That's why I say that the practice of meditation, to establish a practice of meditation is to establish a relationship with your true nature. It's the same thing. Because your personality can establish a meditation practice. It can't. And those of you who have attempted to do it and who have succeeded to some extent, to the degree that you have succeeded in establishing meditation practices, to the degree that you've succeeded in establishing a relationship with your authentic nature. It's the same thing. Because the personality cannot meditate. I mean, you've seen people come into this class that haven't been part of the class for a long time, you know. And a lot of those people can't even make it through one class. And if they make it through one class and they're impressed about the talk and they're inspired to some degree, you know, that they're inspired and they're impressed even though they struggle to meditate, right? Often they'll come up to me and say, oh, I really enjoyed the talk, you know, I can see what you're talking about here. I really want to start to practice this. I'm going to be coming back to the class. I never see him again. And that's been a lot of people, right? If we go back in years since I've been doing this class and how many people have come and gone, right? A lot of people have come and gone. That's just an indication of what I'm pointing at when I say that most people can't tolerate the experience. That's also why I say that the one thing that will determine your success in these teachings and practices is your persistence. Because the personality can't persist in anything. So if you persist, the only way you're persisting is because you've gotten access to your true nature. That's the only way you can persist. Right? And if you stay in the process, if you stay on the path, you cannot fail. Because where you're going is where you are. So you cannot fail, because where you're going is where you are. So you have to have faith in the truth. You have to just stay in the process. You have to persist in the process. And as you do that, you'll start experiencing things loosening up. It has to happen. It's inevitable.